Welcome to the Startup Women podcast. On the show today, we are thrilled to have Farlinger and Serina on the show. Ella and Serina will be launching Trusty in April of 2025. Trusty exists to make STI testing more accessible and cements the idea that sexual health needs to be stigma-free and rooted in community. Ella knew from a young age that her passion was communication and connection. Through performing arts, Ella learned how to tell stories, captivate an audience, and affect others. When Serina approached Ella to start Trusty, she knew that it was an exciting opportunity to merge her creative and intellectual passions. Serina has a background in technology and product management with a passion for building things that solve real problems. Over dinner, Serina and Ella discussed the STI landscape in Ontario and beyond, and that night, Trusty was born, driven by a shared vision to create something better. Together, their vision is to make Trusty the go-to platform for sexual health, entering global markets, integrating AI-driven personalized guidance, and ensuring that getting answers about this deeply personal area of health is simple. Welcome to the show, Ella and Serina.
Hello, thanks for having us.
We're so excited to be here. It's so fun to have that read out because it brings me back to that dinner, which was also one of the best dinners you've ever made for me, Serina. It was like a family cow soy classic recipe that they do. Anyway, anytime you read that, I'm like, we should do that again. That was
fun. Invite us. We'd like to be involved. Amazing. That should be like an anniversary moment for you guys. Every year on the anniversary of the business, cook the same meal.
Genius.
Have some.
Thank you. We've been talking about this. We're like, what on earth do we do? Perfect.
Yeah.
Done.
Sorted.
Action number one coming from today's podcast. Getting to know the business a little bit better beyond that dinner. For our listeners, can you describe Trusty? What inspired you to really venture into this sexual health industry? Walk us through that journey and maybe the conversation you had over dinner.
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about Trusty specifically first. So Trusty is a service that we're launching, as you said, in April 2025, bringing rapid STI testing and treatment to you virtually. So you can order a kit online, it'll come to your door, and because it's a rapid test, you get your results in under 15 minutes. The HIV test that we're launching with, actually, you'll get your results in under 60 seconds, which is amazing. And as for follow-up care, we want to make sure that everyone who comes through Trusty has the opportunity to talk to a nurse, a clinician that we will provide you with directly through our platform virtually. So if you have questions or you test positive or really just want to talk, then that's what we're here for.
Amazing.
And a big part of what designed each element of that process for us, what we discussed over those Thai noodles, was in the testing landscape right now. We know we live in a system that has public resources, which are great, but are also very overburdened and are also in some cases sort of provided on what feels like a charitable or urgency basis. It doesn't feel like quality care for something that is already makes people quite activated. If you think of sort of that feeling of waiting in the waiting room under those fluorescent lights and someone's calling your name loudly and you're just like wishing this would end. And then when you step into the room and, often, sadly, you get a practitioner who maybe is also overburdened. Maybe it's a walk-in clinic and this isn't really their specialty. And unfortunately, there's a lot of insensitivity in your conversation maybe. And then you have this results turnaround that can be up to 2 weeks. And then you have this follow-up question, which has been a big, big problem in the conversations that we've had with people our age and prospective customers, which is like, right now, how the public system functions is you just don't get a call if you're negative, right? Which leads to that 2 weeks of like, oh God, did I turn my phone off and then I missed it? Or what if they got the wrong number? And I've heard horror stories of they just don't get the call and months later a GP says, hey, by the way, did you get treated for that? And they're like, and again, we're not here to criticize or villainize the system as it's functioning now. We understand that the system is flawed because of larger systematic issues at play. And more that we framed ourselves maybe as sort of disruptors in the beginning, the more that we talk to folks in the healthcare space, the more that we realize that we're alleviators and people are like, please take this away. We don't want to deal with minor infection diagnostics. We want to do imaging and acute care. That is what this is for. So more and more, we're seeing that movement towards at-home diagnostics, and that's why it's a market that's just going to be exploding in the next 5 years, and we're hoping to ride that wave.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I'm thinking about what you mentioned, Serina, that even so you're talking Ellie, you're speaking to the no news is good news thing, but to Serina's point, you said what if you get yes, you have something on that at-home test, and how do we support people through that? And I love that you're also solving that piece, which I hadn't realized when I was looking into Trusty and what you provide. So I love that you're providing that next step for founders, well, who knows, for everyone. for everyone. Next step for anyone who's making use of these tests, these at-home tests, and really interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and if I can just add to, sorry, Melanie, this is me. I get so excited and then I just jump in and keep going. So when you get bored, just like throw your hands up. Part of why that process, when you do test negative and you have no resources available to you, which interestingly, like often, most of the time people are going to be testing negative, right? It's not like positivity rates are so high that we're dealing even close to like 25% of people getting positive. Luckily, they're lower than that. That is a very good thing. However, folks who are testing negative are still going to have so many questions. But I'm having these symptoms, but my partner tested positive. I know I had sex with someone who was exposed. Like these questions that you're just supposed to be left completely alone with and never get that call. And so for us, that is also part of this education piece. That's sort of what we're working on in tandem with our physical kit product. We are also building an online forum space where we're trying to combine kind of like the natural discursive content that you see on something like Reddit, where, you have sort of people venting about a situation and getting community answers. But of course, that sort of dialogue lacks a bit of legitimacy or maybe kind of like a medical through line. And so we're hoping to utilize our nurse team to kind of provide a really natural moderation that can say like, hey, so that's super frustrating. Just so you know, like false positives are quite rare, blah, 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 like just coming in with a bit more of that informed tone, but still fostering a community that can speak openly about this. Because frankly, like a lot of the time, if you think of how you've learned about STIs, it's probably like gabbing with your friends over a drink when one person gets a pap smear and then goes, oh, by the way, this came up. Like, what do you guys know about this? Like, I don't even know how, like that is how this information is disseminated. And the sex ed curriculums are always in flux, and our access to these public resources are never secure, as we're learning down south. And so it's important to us that in tandem with the physical care that we're also trying to revolutionize that education piece too.
Mm-hmm. Really interesting.
Through line. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Now, last week we had a really interesting conversation with Rachel Bartholomew of FemTech Canada, and so I'm hearing a lot of what you're speaking to about having to do a lot of the education piece, it reflects what Rachel was saying as well, and that being a really large burden when you're getting into FemTech specifically, but in your case, sexual wellness and sexual health, I imagine as well. So she provided this really great reminder that FemTech was only coined in 2016 and has grown 300% in the past 5 years. This is still new. And you're also speaking to this space, STI testing at home and testing at home in general is going to really grow. So these are both kind of like, similar areas that we're seeing growing. And with Rachel, we discussed how this space is filled with incredible opportunity and strong founders such as yourselves. But in order to have the chance to grow and thrive these businesses, we need in combination more gasoline on the fire, as well as support and time to build and grow the businesses and build and grow the sector. So as relatively new founders in this space, I am curious about your take on the Canadian FemTech ecosystem and particularly the sector that you're in, and any insights that you've drawn over the last year or so.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm going to give this one to Ella because she loves talking about FemTech and all of this. So honestly, Ella, take it away.
Start. Well, okay, so yesterday we went to the DMZ, I don't know, DMZ, I guess. DMZ.
Bit political.
Their Women's Innovation Summit pitch competition for this year. And I can't tell you how, like, it's a mixture of just like pride and like it is that fire, that like gasoline type fire, watching these brilliant female founders holding these massive checks with 6 figures on them and just like seeing that capital be handed over and being like, heck yeah, like that is so flippin' exciting. And I mean, we know the stats, we know that female founders have better ROI, like, we know that. But to see that exchange happen and to see the confidence in those young, brilliant founders was like just so exciting. At the same time, like I think exactly this sort of duality that you're talking about, that you guys spoke with Rachel about, I come from a bit of an arts background, and I think a lot about how in the last 10 years, 5 years, there's been a massive shift to uplifting diverse voices, right? Telling stories that we haven't been able to hear, which is super important. And at the same time, when agencies are throwing money at, let's say, like a female filmmaker to make her first film with a desperate need to just like get the product out there so they can say that they made a female film, it sort of is like, this creator is left scrambling, being like, well, sorry, I'm actually decades behind my white male counterparts, and I actually need a bit more time to grow, not just like pump it out. And so I think just as much as I want to see those 6-figure checks be handed to founders who are doing it and completely capable and should get that support, I also want to see that kind of injection going into incubation, fostering, development, because the truth is, like, we are just behind. We are behind on understanding the vocabulary. We're behind on having the confidence to even just like pretend like we know what we're doing, which is a lot of the game, you know? So it's just like, it's totally a two-pronged situation. It needs to be just as much investment in the execution as the incubation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were having dinner with this amazing group of, female entrepreneurs, founders, etc. And one of them, who's an investor in Trusty, actually, is someone who speaks about and advocates for financial literacy for women and starting for women at such a young age. And after hearing that, Ella and I really took it upon ourselves to be like, okay, we really need to put in the work today to be as knowledgeable about legal matters and financial matters as any one of our far more experienced counterparts, but also our male counterparts. And, it's great that we have the opportunities to do that just by virtue of being founders and, having the access to these kinds of people and resources. But, a lot of people by and large are not necessarily even encouraged into entrepreneurship, especially young women from a young age. And so why would you even take it upon yourself to start learning? But how can you know you want to do it if you don't even know that you need to learn it?
Amazing.
I love what you both, Serina and Ella, have just mentioned around, the incubation, the scaffolding of support that needs to be required, and the nuance when we look at FemTech specifically and the potential biases or conversations that you uniquely are going to be navigating that, a SaaS company is not necessarily going to have the same barriers around or, based on various industries. And that sort of bridges into, a question that I know Melanie feels passionate about in understanding. Yes, we recognize the stigmas that exist and persist in ecosystems. We can't put breaking down all those stigmas on the founders themselves. You're a part of this process of education, et cetera, but we need to see systems change. Has that informed your go-to-market strategy, how you've approached, you're really focusing on the financial literacy side, building up confidence, coming into those conversations with as much power as possible, but how have those potential barriers or those stigmas existed in the spaces when you're thinking about how you're going to navigate, let's say, the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Great question. Do you want to address the stigma piece specifically, or more just how we are personally navigating?
Maybe the stigma first. What's your kind of gut sense on where we're at this moment? I think obviously everybody has their own experience with this and with STIs in particular and fear and all the different emotions that are around it. Stigma first, and then from your experience, how are you navigating through it?
Interesting. Yeah, I think the stigma piece of it, I try not to think about it too much, very honestly. Like when I walk into a room, personally, I just want to be myself who's a founder, and this is what I do. That being said, I do feel, even having spoken to other female founders, that there is a bit of a pressure to be perfect all the time. And any slip up is examined and dissected so much more viscerally. It might be with a male counterpart, and I won't say that in general, but just in my experience, I really feel like I need to nail everything 100% every single time and look fashionable and look good and speak properly and never mess up. And maybe that's also just me. Maybe like I'm a control freak and a perfectionist. That's my problem. But I do think that there are some more strides that we need to take in fostering confidence and just being like, all right, this is a learning journey, and we need to be understanding of the fact that this is our first time founding a company. We're not going to get everything right, and that's okay. And I would love for there to be, more spaces where we can have those conversations about like, what are the things, those like unspoken little things that you need to get right in order to do well in business that not everyone necessarily inherently has.
I would say for Trusty too, like, I was thinking about High Ivy, and I think about Dilato and Evie and Marlowe, like some of these maybe like specifically for people with female reproductive organs. We benefit from not having to say vagina or penis in a pitch because we just kind of can generally talk about both sexes and intersex people testing for these things. And so I think that's huge. And even still, we are faced with like 10 minutes of penis jokes from the odd male investor before they're ready to like actually talk about it, which again, I'm happy to, it's funny. It is funny. Let's make the jokes. But at a certain point, man, we got to move on. anyway, so certainly that stigma comes into the conversations, and right away, what's nice about it though, honestly, is that right away who gets it and who doesn't. And I really think about how beneficial it is for us for not wasting our time with advisors or investors or just even people in our network, because someone, and again, like, we have amazing middle-aged male advisors who hear that and they go, oh man, like when I got divorced, I had the same GP as my wife and I tried to talk to them and I couldn't get a test and it was so uncomfortable, and they get it. Or we have like an older female investor who's just like, I wish that I had this when I kid my daughter. I want her to have something like there's people have the connections to it in their own ways. And when they hear it and they get it, we're on, And so I feel like if I had a company that was like some data analytics company and people were like, yeah, I like data and I see the opportunity, that's the conversation you're having. Whereas with us, it's like you're cutting out the fat right away because you're getting people who really see the vision. And I think that's pretty amazing. And I think like that's a lot of FemTech because, we joke like, there's no men tech, but whatever. Sorry. FemTech, technology for female, feminine people. It is sort of imbued with that. Why? Like fundamentally, right? All of those products have this sort of specific purpose to serve an underserved community. And that's sort of like a spine of all of these companies. And so in a way, you're pre-selecting for kind of the most passionate, innovative, disruptive, creative founders. And so whenever we find ourselves in those spaces, it's like, oh yeah, these are the people. Whereas, you go to the odd, like just med tech or like CPG conference and it's sort of just, yeah, like it's great, brilliant people, but there's that spine of like, I have a mission. I have a broader mission here, which for us was just like, people should be empowered to take control of this deeply personal area of health, And so that's what it is. And it's not like people should analyze their data. I don't know. What's the mission of a data analytics company? Maybe I should find that out before I keep using them as an example. Yeah.
Depends on the data, because some would be the same
that
outcome as you, right?
Because
I would be like so fascinated what you just spoke to about the people who will be able to make use of these tests that I didn't think about. That speaks to my own bias around thinking about like when I was a young girl, and I was trying to find access to these things, and I was like, where's the clinic within this distance? And oh, is anyone going to see me? And how do I get somewhere else? And so it's interesting to think about like it's not just the teenagers, right? This is so many different people that it impacts.
Man. We're learning that constantly. And it's not just about age bracket too. Like if you think about younger rural folks in Ontario who, exactly as you described, like the nearest clinic is an hour away and the pharmacist in their town is their son's soccer coach. And
right.
Like the lack of anonymity, never mind accessibility in those areas, is so difficult. And so you're seeing like men's health company called Phoenix get a lot of popularity in the prairie provinces because of that, exactly that reason. These like very personal, like erectile dysfunction medication, balding medication that they don't necessarily want to have to like hand over from someone they see at church every Sunday, And so there's definitely that rural aspect of this. And then of course for us, we're urban young women and we sort of built it around, we have a busy life and we don't have time to just wait around. But then you think of, yes, recently divorced folks, older adults, people above 60 are having the fastest rising STI rates. No one wants to talk about it, but it's true. And it's because women can't get pregnant and they often haven't been using condoms for decades. And suddenly now they're single and it's like, whoa, what? And then, and then that goes all the way up, yes, into the long-term care homes. People just need to get over it. Grandpa has gonorrhea. It's okay. Just give him some antibiotics and he'll be fine.
Yeah. Really well kept secret, but absolutely amazing. So it sounds like those are some incredible, like really interesting learnings. Like it came from your own, what you were feeling, and now you're seeing it resonate across so many different spaces and people for different uses. So in addition to those kinds of learnings, I'd love to understand like what in these kind of like early days, as I know you launched the website about 6 months ago, I believe, which is really exciting. And then going to be launching the product this year. So would love to understand kind of any surprising or rewarding and or difficult moments that you've had so far.
Honestly, I think the most rewarding moments have been in connecting with people. And by virtue of us walking into a room and being like chlamydia, that really does take down a lot of boundaries with people. And what I love is it's really allowed for people to share their stories with us because we hopefully appear to be a safe space to do so. And it's been so fascinating now that we're constantly talking about STIs and sexual health and everything. That way more people than you would think have had an experience with an STI. It's not something that a lot of people want to talk about, but it has been like so empowering to our mission to be like, oh my gosh, this does really affect so many people. And because of the stigma around it, we're not talking about it. And so, like we're hoping to be the place where you can have those conversations so that those conversations can take place more widely. And I just, like being a young woman, talking to friends and things like that, there's just so much that we don't know. And I also want people to not feel embarrassed for what they do not know. Because in a lot of these situations, sometimes you think or are even told straight up, you should have known better. And actually, maybe you didn't. Maybe you just didn't know. So I think that's been one of the most rewarding parts about it, is to just see all of that come together and see just by virtue of having these conversations that we're achieving our mission.
Yeah, I mean, so much. Like there's just so much constantly. It's such an amazing roller coaster. And having a co-founder who also, like, Serena and I have been friends for almost like 10 years. Like we've known each other for a long, long time. And so having a co-founder whom you have that trust, that history with, like when I'm down, she pulls me up and vice versa. And so like we're so lucky to have that counterbalance with each other, because it really is a roller coaster. And I think like the reality that I live by, or the mantra that I live by, is just like, you are strapped in, like you are on the track. And as long as you are on the track, you are going forward, and it's going to go up and down. But like, you have to have that tunnel vision, because like, yes, there's 1,000 reasons to stop doing anything ever. And if it was easy, no one would do it. And so for me, that's really kind of in those downs after Serina pulls me up, that is what I'm saying to myself, and those challenges, there's like a myriad of different things. Like for us, we really wanted to launch with a full panel testing kit. That was really important to us. Testing technology, and especially in Canada where the licensing is very strict, the tests that we have available to us is an HIV self-test. And so we figured, why don't we just launch now and learn quickly? Yes, it might be a lower volume, but also maybe it'll surprise us. Like, as we know, there are the communities that often test for HIV, the queer community, are the most proactive about testing. And that is a community that has demonstrated to us what proactive testing can do. HIV has obviously had an insane journey from what we know in the 80s to now. The fact that you can get a test result in 60 seconds is sort of mind-blowing, right? And so, just making those decisions every time you're faced with something, of just like, I am on the track. Okay, so this is what it is. How do we just keep strapped in? That's really what we get to remind each other along the way.
I love that. And I love that you just mentioned trust, Ella. Like, has that informed the name of the business, and in like trusting this system and having this trust both in yourself and like walk us through if there's a connection there?
Yeah, originally it was going to be testy, but then we thought that was a little too testicle.
A little bit on the nose.
Yeah. And like, don't want to like make anyone feel excluded anatomically. Yeah. So yeah, we were just playing around. We wanted that STI ending. And so and then finally, like, it was almost like, oh my God, how did we not come up with this sooner? So it hit us. But yeah, I mean, truly, like, trust is also what built the foundation of like me and Serina's partnership and relationship. And we've been friends forever. Serina went to school in the UK. I went to school at U of T here in Toronto. And while we were both like crushing it in our respective places, just having a friend who you're like, I'm just so flippin' proud of you, and like, I can't wait to see what you'll do. And then having that realization of like, wait, what if I do get to see what you do? What if we do it together?
Do it together.
Exactly.
That's awesome. With talking about STIs and diving into this topic even deeper, I am so fascinated with this consumer side that I anticipated, it would be very difficult to validate some of these assumptions, or, get people actually talking about their experiences in this space. So it is very comforting to hear that you've had, both on the investor side and on the consumer side, so many evolving conversations and candid perspectives of here's what I did, here's what makes me nervous, et cetera. Is great. So I love that for all of you. We've also learned through your website, which is amazing, that Melanie mentioned launching a couple months ago, that between 2009 and 2019, chlamydia is up 33%, gonorrhea is up 181%, syphilis is up 393%. So yes, we might be talking about these things maybe a little bit more openly or in different circles, et cetera, but those numbers are pretty big. So how do we normalize these conversations around STI testing? Yes, girls' dinners, chit-chatting about, what's going on in your lives, those things may or may not be happening. But what's the best vehicle to approach this from from a lens of safety and comfort and making people feel really, safe is really the top word that kind of comes to mind, because it's also, obviously such a health issue. And how can we, what's sort of a call to action, even folks listening to the podcast today, how do we normalize talking about this as health and, widening that scope when we talk about our well-being and how we're doing in general? So would love your thoughts around how we normalize these conversations.
Okay. Do you want to start? Should I start?
You go.
Okay. So one of the things with Trusty that we really want to do and be is to be in the places where people are connecting. Well, we're basically places where people are probably going to meet and then have sex. So that's raves, that's bars, that's parties, that's all the places where, people are meeting each other and enjoying each other's company and forming new relationships. And I think that's something that sets us apart from a lot of the more sterile or clinical offerings that are available on the market. Is, sexual health, yes, it is very much health, but it is also just something that's happening, and we need to get on board with that. So with that, we want to make the conversation around STI testing something routine. We want to change people's perspective of it from something that's very reactive to something that is proactive. It's, hey, yeah, I'm going to go do this super fun, awesome thing. I'm going to make sure I'm all good. You want to make sure you're all good? Okay, cool. Let's play. That's really what we are striving to do. And so hopefully by being in those places and getting ourselves, our reputation cemented amongst the groups of people that are around those places, we're hoping that there's a little bit of, it'd be nice if there was kind of like a cool factor around it. Oh my God, did you hear about Trusty? Oh, hey, you're going on that Tinder date. Wait, 1 second. Let me do my Trusty test before. All good? All right, let's go. So we want to take away a lot of the sterility and fear around testing and sexual health and just make it something that's like as normal as buying a pack of condoms. It doesn't need to be a big deal.
Sterility, tonally speaking, to be clear. It's still sterile.
Totally sterile.
I love
I'm
that.
so glad so firstly, it was really, really important for me, in addition to sort of a performing arts background. One of my degrees was in research, and I'm hugely into behavior, and I think sexuality is so fundamentally sociological. And so when we were just conceiving the idea pre-website, which is going to change when we launch, by the way, I'm glad you love it, but she's about to have a whole new sexy look. Just you wait. But anyway, before we had anything going, I was really adamant with Serina that I really wanted to run a survey we did, I think it was 200 Canadians, which is, a small sample size, to be clear, but this is also we paid for this survey. And it was also skewed younger and urban, so keep that in mind. However, what was so exciting for us was learning that, I'm going to forget the numbers on it because it's been so long since I've been in the pitch deck.
77%.
77% of the respondents said that they would rather pay out of pocket to get an at-home rapid STI test than go to a doctor. And, you think that's awesome. What's even cooler is that is when we controlled for people who earlier in their survey said that they are perfectly happy with how much they're being tested, they don't want to get tested anymore. That number was at 72. And then for the people who said, I really do want to get tested more, that was at 88. So you're still seeing, regardless of people's historical testing behavior or preferences, this drive to have that option available, to exactly Serina's point, moving something from reactive to proactive, which, is obviously great from a business standpoint, but is also amazing from a population well-being standpoint. We know that prevention is key. So read the other stats you brought up. I live in this research world, and I think something that's really difficult about how public health data is disseminated is that it is in large reports, sometimes annual. That one actually is the biggest STI report that Health Canada has done, and it's over 5 years old now. It completely doesn't include COVID, which we know had changing testing rates, which really skewed the positivity rates. And there's no conversation about how some of those clinics shutter their doors entirely post-COVID, so there's less resources, and we don't see how that's affected more recent trends. There's a lot of information in that's it's very illustrative, but there's also a lot missing, and there isn't really that regular ability to check in with trends in your area. If you think of back in COVID, we could check every day how many new COVID cases there were, right? And so something that we've been thinking about is if we can build out a database that sort of demonstrates in Kingston at Queen's Frosh, there was a spike in this. And so now we're going to get the school to be a little more proactive about this. So it allows us to have an actual monitoring system that gives people the information that they need when they need it, so that people don't go, oh my God, syphilis rose almost 400% in that decade. That's insane. How did I not know that? Is it still rising? I still don't get to know what, like, and again, it's because those research figures and groups, they can't just pump something out that regularly, you know? So having that kind of database is a really big goal that we have. That'll obviously be down the line once we have sort of the regular users, but that would be something that would just be so nice for giving back to the community and just making something that's a little more interactive and accessible and on like an urgency basis.
Yeah, that's amazing. So if you were to like look into that like down the line, I know we asked Rachel a question of like if there was like a crystal ball to look into a different alternative universe where that already exists and there's already Trusty in the hands of all these people. Like what does that look like? So I'm someone growing up in that space now, and I feel empowered and informed and confident. I feel like I can talk about these things. The population health data is up to date consistently with Trusty brand on there saying like, yes, we're pumping out this data. Like, how am I, like, what do I care about around sexual health? How am I accessing Trusty? Where is it? Is it like when I was literally just looking through photo albums from when I was in my 20s, which is a while ago. It was like about 20 years ago now, but just under. And there's a picture of me dancing with a Trojan mascot at a club, to be candid. What if there's a Trusty mascot right next to that, or the Trojan guy, that's giving out condoms? How amazing would that have been? So, like, could you paint, if we were like to jump into imagination land, what does that world look like for people? I love your
It's
insight.
like you walk into your university like quad and there's a Trusty vending machine that like your friends have used all the time and you're like, oh yeah, that thing. And then you walk into your student union, maybe it's like a queer focused student union, and they're having a Trusty sponsored STI trivia night and they're learning more about trends and they're getting a free kit giveaway. And then they go to a rave that night and there's a Trusty cool down zone that's just like all about making people feel safe and cool, and maybe they can like have a nice chat with a nurse, or maybe they're just getting there to like relax and just calm down. And then maybe that night they go home with someone and luckily they have a kit and they can do it there, and then they can have an honest conversation about their sexual health history, and that can be a nice window for them to have those conversations. And should anyone need care, they're going to have access to trauma informed nurses, people who will be ready to take on the plethora of issues that can come from sex. Because I have this in our business plan. It's like my favorite line. It's like, we understand the multiplicities of sex. Sex is really scary. Sex is super fun. Sex is really playful. And sex can have a lot of long-term damages. And so we know all of that. And so I think like for us, that ideal user is an inconceivable range of users. It's someone who has been in a monogamous relationship for 5 years and did their first test and something came up and they're like, what the hell? And it's someone who is a sex worker and is doing a test every month and needs care that isn't going to be judgmental. It is a queer person who has had terrible experiences in the testing system and doesn't want to have that stigmatized or discriminative care. It is someone, yes, who's had a terrible, maybe, God forbid, unfortunate sexual experience and wants to talk to someone who, as Serina's point earlier, isn't going to say you should have known better. Just the last thing someone in that situation needs to hear, So for me, that would be the goal, is that anyone from any sexual path, however they've gotten there, knows that they're represented and cared for in what Trusty is doing.
Unbelievable. This is so inspiring. And I love that we're talking to you at the beginning, that we have all these ideas, we're hearing all this enthusiasm and all this energy, and the world of possibility is so open. Like, never considered all of these different audiences that you could be supporting. And yes, the quad is one perfect example. Then you go in every age demographic and every bracket of experience. You could be painting us a picture of a completely different experience in the retirement home and what that might look like in a different context. So just, the scale of this business excites me so much, and all the kind of applied opportunities. So I'm excited for y'all. This is going to be great.
Us too. Maybe we'll come back in like 5-10 years and maybe we'll just be a data analytics company. Watch it happen.
Yeah.
Poetic justice.
Yes, we'll play you that clip of like the data company. What do they do anyways?
Oh God.
In painting this picture, we try not to just focus on what challenges are you going to experience as women founders and blah, blah, blah. But in painting that picture, is there anything that you're trying to kind of get ahead of, or anything that you're anticipating being that maybe bigger, bolder, it's going to take a lot more energy to go over with? What can you anticipate maybe being one of the more challenging parts of this adventure?
The United States of America. Yeah. Yeah, truly. I mean, Canada is the landscape that bred this idea. Canada is the place where we want to serve our population. It has a very incredibly vast range of needs in this population, and we want to be able to address them. At the same time, it's not a population that's a real bang for your buck. And so the reality is we can go into a state that has probably the same population as this entire country and get a lot more traction. And so yes, the long-term goal certainly being to go into the states. Other markets we're looking at as well, but I'm just thinking about that right now because obviously it feels really stressful as a business owner to be thinking about what a US entry looks like. Certainly stressful for female founders who have a sexual health company to be thinking about that. I mean, at the same time, it is no better opportunity to have a private option that's affordable for queer people who have gender identities that are not just male or female or not assigned at their freaking birth, who need that care that they don't have to go commute for in person, that they don't feel like there are barriers to their safety, which is just like, can't even believe I have to freaking say that. And the reality, too, being that sexual health clinics that offer abortion care, which is probably 2% of the care they offer, and the other 90 is 98 or 90, and then the six other is STI testing. And so when they defund those sexual health clinics, what they're doing is actually just increasing transmission rates. And so, we want to get down there. We want to help the communities out there as well. We just have to figure out the best way to do that. And also just, you're sort of funny in that we are mostly like, we're basically logistics and marketing. We have manufacturers that we work with and we have a nursing platform that we're partnered with. And so we, because of that, are quite agile and we can move into different markets without these like crazy R&D costs or worrying about getting FDA approval for our test and having years and years to invest in that. But at the same time, we are like, hearing back from manufacturers of like, it's in the pipeline, we're waiting, and we're like, okay, let us know. And so the reality is that at-home diagnostics, rapid test technology, it is one of the most incredibly innovative sectors of health tech. And so we're going to benefit from that, but at the same time, right now we are literally like paddling to that crest of the wave and trying to catch it. So the US is going to be the big monster, the big hurdle, but I'm really excited for it because for all the reasons I mentioned, I think there's a great need down there.
And I think even like globally, the opportunities here, especially with sex workers and folks that are incredibly vulnerable in many, many countries where this type of offering or the stigma is even more elevated, like the global opportunity here is so massive. So yes, stay in Canada. Yes, build in Canada. But yeah, we would love to see this tech.
Yes, and I happen to know Startup Canada and Kayla have some great resources on going global, have a great tariff toolkit, and have some really great connections with the Trade Commissioner services. So just
and a great pitch competition where you can pitch.
Yes.
Anyway, not about this.
No, I mean,
it excites me.
No, but it's helpful. Yeah.
We think a lot about those global markets, and our nurse partner is partly based in Dubai. And so we think a lot about like, what would an offering in the UAE look like, where now maybe we're driving more about discretion in a culture where discussions about sex are really not like, if you think it's stigmatized here, maybe like, so it is so exciting to think about the pieces, what different areas need and what different populations need. And so, yeah, Trusty worldwide, baby. That's what we're aiming for.
The party.
Yeah, Mr. Pitbull, Mr. Worldwide will be coming to the launch party for our global market entry.
I can't wait to participate in some of these launch parties. Yeah, it's going to be fabulous. Great. So some final, thoughts, call outs, etc. Obviously, we're going to ask, where do we find Trusty? How can we follow the journey over the next couple months as you launch? But any final pieces of advice to our audience as you're kind of at the precipice of this massive, I think of it about, Melanie and I are both moms, like this birth of this new business and, having this whole new chapter and all the work that you've put into it to date. What advice do you have for other women founders, other women in FemTech in particular, women navigating these businesses at times like this? What advice do you have to hopefully help them navigate what is just a wackadoo time?
I think Ella said it really well earlier, which is just focus on staying on the track. It's going to take you where it takes you, but just stay on it. And especially for people in FemTech and who want to get into it, I think it's such an exciting time to be part of this wonderful community. I mean, just having the opportunity to work on what some people would consider niche things, but it is ultimately half the population. And at least for us, I wouldn't say we're exclusively FemTech. I mean, we can really work for everyone. People are now only starting to be ready to have conversations that include the word vagina. And so there's still a little bit of a shock value there. And actually, I think you can use that to your advantage by speaking openly and just saying the words as they are and just being open-minded about it. The people who are with you are going to be loudly with you, and the people who aren't so about it are going to remember you.
Yeah, totally. I find your community, find your people. It can be so lonely out there. I would say, especially maybe I'm just riding off of an amazing couple weeks of being in community with lots of brilliant women, but we don't really take our time to fill our cup as founders, like you're grinding for 12 hours a day and you don't really stop. And to sort of check out, even in a space that's like actually for work, and that makes it even more exciting, and fill that cup has been just such an amazing experience. And we met a young founder, or a young student in business, a female student in business last week, and she was sort of like, I have friends who one of them's in medicine and the other one's in business too, and my mom keeps saying we should start a company together, and we're like, do it. Just find out what your medicine friend, she can be an RA in a lab, and maybe she focuses on something that's amazing. Just do it. Like, just get in there and make it happen. Because I don't know, for me especially, like, I studied sociology and I studied opera, and somehow the convergence of that research and performing world, it's like, oh yeah, entrepreneurship is totally a transferable space for these things, and no one had ever told me that. And so I think just making it clear that you don't have to go to Rotman to be the next business mogul. You can use those skills, and if you feel that drive within yourself and you know that you do good work, go for it. Freaking do it, and find some ladies along the way.
So true. Honestly, yeah, I studied international relations and wrote my dissertation on sex work legislation. And I was like, cool, I'm going to go work in tech. And anyway, here we are. It is tangentially pretty related. So really, for anyone out there listening, it doesn't really matter what you studied. If you want to be an entrepreneur, do it, and do it while you have the ability to do so.
I know there's like no minimum degree or minimum qualification or years of experience even.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that about entrepreneurship. There's no real actual barrier to entry
And like, after years of Serina and I working at different places and basically being asked to do stuff way above our pay grade within years, because we were both like driven and hardworking people, we were like, wait, why don't we just do that for ourselves? Like, I don't care for this. I don't care to be overutilized.
That's a good International Women's Day statement. I don't care to be overutilized.
Yes, that should be our mantra. I love it. Oh, so cool. There's so much in there that I love. The story you told, that to me is kind of like illustrates the changing of generations. Since when I was the girl, the young, 18, 19-year-old thinking about what I want to do, to have the mom say, "Oh, you and your friend should start a company." That wasn't something that was like on the minds of my parents, like you're going to be a teacher or counselor or, something very much like profession, more traditional profession. So I love that we're seeing these shifts. And I think that's that's a hopeful message to me, which I love. And so, yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. And I think to wrap up, we also would love to know, as Kayla mentioned, where can we direct consumers to learn more about you and to make use of Trusty when it launches? Tell us about your next kind of 6 months and how we can access all the great work you're doing.
Yeah, so we are launching officially in April, and that includes both our brand new portal with our brand new sexy design and our first kit, which is an HIV kit that you can order to your door. Where to find us? Trusty.ca. That's .ca. Go Canada. And on pretty much every social platform, it's at Trusty Tests. At TRUSTITESTS. That's wrong. Wait, can you cut that out?
Yes.
I didn't spell it right.
Yes.
Oh my God.
It's a hard one to spell out.
TRUSTITESTS.
Isn't that what you said?
I don't know. I think I forgot the
I think you said it.
I think you said
I think you said
Trusty
TESTS. I think you said it. Yeah.
TESTS.
Yeah.
Say it one more time, Serina, just so we get it.
Whole thing.
Sure. You can find our fresh and sexy website at trusty.ca, and you can find us on pretty much any social platform at Trusty Tests. That's TRUSTITES.
Boom.
Bang. English.
Amazing. It's spelling. Tricky one.
And as In terms of what we're up to for the next few months, we're going to be at an event at Oasis Aqua Lounge on April 20th. And then we're going to be all around Pride Toronto this year, hoping to participate in all sorts of different events, sponsoring some stuff. So keep your eye out on the socials for that and come hang out. We love to talk about syphilis. So, come chat.
Thank you so much,
Love
Ella.
it.
Thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Serina. This was an awesome episode. Thank you for sharing perspectives, journey, just what you've learned along the way. And I love coming out of these episodes surprised by what I'm learning and what the conversations happening in the world. So thanks for bringing that to the Startup Canada podcast and Startup Women Takeover here. And Melanie, thanks for joining me as co-host again this week.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.